In the early morning of December 30th, 1923, French aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and his mechanic, André Prévot, set out on what seemed to be another routine flight across the Sahara Desert. Saint-Exupéry, a pioneering aviator and experienced pilot, was tasked with delivering mail from France to various countries across North Africa. He had flown across the desert many times before and was well acquainted with the risks of such journeys. However, no amount of preparation or experience could have prepared him for the disaster that was about to unfold. Their aircraft, a Potez 25, was a small, single-engine biplane used for mail delivery. The flight took off from Toulouse, France, with a plan to reach their destination in Dakar, Senegal, through a series of refueling stops. As Saint-Exupéry and Prévot flew over the barren expanse of the Sahara Desert, a massive sandstorm suddenly appeared on the horizon. The storm, with its howling winds and swirling sand, was unlike anything they had encountered before. Fighting the wind and sand, they struggled to navigate through the storm, but soon found themselves hopelessly lost in the vast, featureless landscape of the Sahara. Visibility dropped to near zero, and their plane was rocked by turbulence as the storm grew more intense. Just when they thought things couldn't get worse, their engines sputtered and died. Saint-Exupéry and Prévot were forced to make an emergency landing. The Potez 25 crashed violently, but somehow both men survived the wreckage. Their plane had come down in the heart of the Sahara Desert, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. Surrounded by endless sand dunes and no sign of civilization, the men found themselves stranded in a remote and unforgiving environment, with only the wreckage of their plane and the harsh desert around them. Saint-Exupéry, though a skilled aviator, was not immune to the enormity of the situation. The Sahara, a vast, empty stretch of desert, offered no food, no water, and no shelter. Both men were disoriented and shocked from the crash, and their immediate concern was survival. They knew they had to act quickly if they were to stand any chance of making it out alive. With the engine of the plane destroyed and no way to signal for help, they were left with few options. The temperature in the Sahara was extreme, ranging from scorching heat during the day to freezing cold at night, and their supply of water was limited. Saint-Exupéry and Prévot understood the dangers of the desert: dehydration, exhaustion, and the lack of any visible landmarks made it nearly impossible to navigate or find help. After assessing the wreckage, they realized that they would have to venture on foot across the desert, hoping to find any form of civilization or relief. They began walking, rationing their water and food as best they could. Their bodies, already weakened by the shock of the crash, began to suffer under the relentless sun. Sandstorms and heat would whip at their faces, and the landscape, eerily silent and desolate, made every step feel like an eternity. As the hours turned into days, their survival instincts kicked in. Saint-Exupéry, known for his literary talents as well as his aviation skills, began to reflect on the situation in the way a writer might, looking for meaning in the madness. He later described this ordeal in his writing, and it would go on to inspire some of the themes in his most famous work, The Little Prince. The isolation, the vastness of the desert, and the struggle to survive would leave a lasting imprint on him. The men trudged through the desert day after day, with no sign of relief in sight. The temperature soared above 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and at night, the desert grew bitterly cold. Their bodies grew weaker as they continued their desperate journey. Their water supply dwindled, and dehydration began to set in. With every passing hour, it became clear that time was running out. They had little hope of being rescued, and with no way to communicate with the outside world, it felt like they were lost in an endless sea of sand. Despite the crushing despair of their situation, Saint-Exupéry and Prévot never gave up. They shared their dwindling food and water and took turns walking, trying to conserve their strength. In Saint-Exupéry's writing, the ordeal would become a reflection of human perseverance in the face of the most daunting odds. The two men, in the isolation of the Sahara, found a deep camaraderie in their shared struggle to survive. As the days in the unforgiving Sahara Desert stretched on, the situation for Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and André Prévot grew increasingly dire. The intense heat of the desert sun continued to scorch their bodies, leaving them parched and weak. Their water supply was gone, and their bodies were starting to feel the severe effects of dehydration. Each step they took across the burning sands felt like a monumental effort, and the stark, endless desert landscape seemed to mock their futile attempts to find help. With the plain wreckage behind them, the vast emptiness of the Sahara stretched before them. Saint-Exupéry and Prévot tried to stay focused on their goal, finding civilization, any sign of life, or perhaps even a passing caravan. But the relentless desert took its toll on both men, mentally and physically. They had no compass, no map, and no way of knowing which direction to go. The desert, with its cruel, shifting sands, offered no clues. As the days wore on, the effects of their ordeal became more apparent. Saint-Exupéry later wrote about the intense sense of isolation and loneliness he felt, even as he and Prévot struggled together for survival. The vast emptiness of the Sahara, the absence of any landmarks or signs of life, created a psychological barrier as well as a physical one. They were not just fighting the desert's harsh conditions, they were fighting the despair that slowly took root in their minds. On the fourth day, their hopes began to fade. They had made little progress, and their strength was nearly gone. The sun seemed to burn them alive during the day, and the nights, though cooler, offered no relief from the brutal exhaustion that had set in. The men were disoriented, staggering from one step to the next, with their minds clouded by thirst and fatigue. The prospect of survival seemed less likely with each passing hour. However, at the moment when it seemed they might give up entirely, something extraordinary happened. As if by fate, just as their energy was completely drained, a caravan of nomadic traders appeared on the horizon. For days, the two men had walked through the desert without any sign of life, but now, in their darkest moment, the hope they had clung to finally materialized. The traders, who were traveling through the desert in search of water, spotted the two men staggering in the distance. They immediately came to their aid, offering Saint-Exupéry and Prévot water, food, and shelter. Their rescue was nothing short of miraculous. The traders, recognizing the men's dire condition, gave them what they needed to survive, offering not just physical relief, but the mental restoration that came from human contact and compassion. After being rescued, Saint-Exupéry and Prévot were brought to a nearby oasis, where they could recover from the trauma of their ordeal. The oasis provided the much-needed water and rest that their bodies had longed for. They spent several days in recovery, regaining their strength and processing the intensity of what had just happened. The gratitude they felt for the traders who saved them was overwhelming, but the psychological impact of their experience would stay with both men for the rest of their lives. The ordeal in the Sahara had taken a heavy toll on Saint-Exupéry. It was during this period of recovery that he reflected on the experience, and in doing so, he found a deeper understanding of life and humanity. The harsh desert and the isolation they had endured would influence his work for years to come. In particular, the experience of vulnerability, the sheer insignificance of man in the face of nature's vastness, and the unexpected kindness of strangers would seep into the pages of The Little Prince, the beloved story he would go on to write in the years following his harrowing desert ordeal. Saint-Exupéry's time in the Sahara, the fight for survival, and the eventual rescue became metaphors in his writing for the themes of innocence, human connection, and the mysteries of life. The lessons he learned in the desert were not just about survival, but about the importance of love, companionship, and the simple, yet profound, joys of life. It was this experience that would influence his famous philosophical musings in The Little Prince, where he would explore the meaning of life, the human need for connection, and the realization that the most important things in life are often invisible to the eye. The harrowing experience Antoine de Saint-Exupéry endured in the Sahara Desert left an indelible mark on his life and work. Although the desert's cruel landscape nearly claimed his life, it also inspired some of his most profound reflections on human nature, survival, and the essential elements of life. Saint-Exupéry's time stranded in the Sahara would become more than just a survival story. It would serve as the foundation for his philosophical musings, which would later be immortalized in his timeless work, The Little Prince. After being rescued, Saint-Exupéry returned to France, but his body and mind remained scarred by his desert ordeal. The physical toll was evident. His body had been weakened by dehydration, malnutrition, and the sheer exhaustion of wandering in the vast emptiness of the Sahara. But the emotional and psychological aftermath of the experience was even more profound. Saint-Exupéry found himself contemplating the meaning of his survival, the randomness of fate, and the role of human connection in the face of life's greatest challenges. Saint-Exupéry's time in the Sahara became a wellspring of inspiration for much of his later writing. His experience of vulnerability in the desert, being entirely dependent on the kindness of strangers for survival, shaped his views on human relationships. He came to understand that, despite the immense loneliness and isolation he had experienced, it was human connection that made survival possible. The kindness of the nomadic traders who found him and Prévot in their desperate state deeply impacted him, highlighting the importance of compassion and the often overlooked beauty of selflessness. Saint-Exupéry's reflections on life in the desert led him to confront the idea of what truly matters. In his writing, he would explore themes of love, responsibility, and the invisible yet essential elements that sustain us. The Little Prince, published in 1943, captured these ideas in its simple yet profound story. The novel, ostensibly about a young prince traveling through the universe, was, at its core, about human connection, the nature of love, and the search for meaning in life. The character of the Little Prince, with his innocence and curiosity, mirrored many of Saint-Exupéry's reflections on his own life. Through the story, he conveyed his belief that the most important things in life, such as love, friendship, and understanding, are often invisible and cannot be measured. What is essential is invisible to the eye, the fox tells the Little Prince in one of the most famous lines of the book. This simple yet profound truth mirrored Saint-Exupéry's realization in the Sahara, where he had seen firsthand how the simplest acts of kindness, offered without expectation of reward, were often the ones that made the most lasting impact. Saint-Exupéry's brush with death in the desert also fueled his understanding of the fragility of life and the deep interconnection of humanity. His near-death experience in the Sahara made him acutely aware of how easily life can be taken away and how important it is to treasure every moment. His writing reflected this heightened sense of awareness, encouraging readers to look beyond the surface of things and recognize the deeper truths of existence. While The Little Prince remains Saint-Exupéry's most celebrated work, the impact of his time in the Sahara can be seen across all of his writing. As an aviator and a writer, Saint-Exupéry often found himself exploring the themes of flight, solitude, and human connection. His earlier works, such as Night Flight and Wind, Sand and Stars, also explore the dangers and wonders of the skies, as well as the profound solitude of flying in the vastness of the world. But it was the Sahara experience that crystallized his thoughts about the fragility of life and the meaning of survival. In the years following the publication of The Little Prince, Saint-Exupéry continued to live with a deep sense of urgency and purpose. He returned to flying, this time as a pilot in World War II, where he flew reconnaissance missions for the Free French Air Force. It was during one of these flights in July 1944 that Saint-Exupéry's life tragically came to an end. He disappeared during a mission over the Mediterranean, and his plane was never found. His death, much like his life, has remained shrouded in mystery, but the legacy he left through his writing and philosophy continues to inspire generations of readers. The Little Prince, with its timeless themes of love, friendship, and the quest for understanding, remains one of the most translated and beloved books in the world. The lessons Saint-Exupéry learned in the Sahara, lessons of survival, compassion, and the value of what is unseen, are as relevant today as they were when he wrote them. The story of Saint-Exupéry's crash in the Sahara Desert, his struggle for survival, and the life-changing lessons he took from that experience remind us of the power of human perseverance, the importance of kindness, and the fragility of life itself. In the face of overwhelming adversity, Saint-Exupéry discovered not just how to survive, but how to understand life in its purest form, how to value what truly matters. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry's experience in the Sahara reminds us that the most important things in life cannot always be seen or measured. Like the Little Prince, we must learn to look beyond the surface and cherish what is essential: love, connection, and understanding. In our own lives, let us remember the lessons of the desert, the importance of human kindness, the fragility of life, and the power of compassion. Through Saint-Exupéry's story, we are encouraged to seek deeper meaning, cherish those around us, and always search for the invisible things that give our lives true purpose.